Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Must Read Titles for Young Readers panel. My name is Kristyn Dorfman, and I'll be moderating this session. I'm so very excited to welcome some of our wonderful authors. Flora, who wrote A Spoonful of Time from Quirk Books. Kelly Armstrong, A Royal Guide to Monster Slaying, The Final Trial from Puffin, Canada. Andrea Beatrice Arango with Evilise Explains It All from Random House Books for Young Readers. Martha Jocelyn, The Seaside Corpse from Tundra Books, and Jonny Lambert from Bear and Bird Try Again from DK. Welcome, everyone. So we have a large panel and a very small amount of time. So we're gonna jump right in, and I'm gonna start with Kelly. Throughout the book, A Royal Guide to Monster Slaying, The Final Trial, Rowan and her party are confronted with people assuming they are incapable and silly simply because they're young. They are underestimated at every turn, leading to some dangerous and easily avoidable situations. This is relatable to so many of our middle grade readers. So what drew you to exploring this theme?
I think it really is relatable to so many kids. They're at that age where they're still being treated like small children, and they're clearly not. These kids are 12, 13. They are thinking things through. They are able to do so much more than they're given credit for. In the story, Rowan is taking on a position that she shouldn't have been given until she was 18 or so. So it just adds to it. But now we're in book 4, and she's been proving herself all the way along. And yet she's going to continue to meet new people who are going to make the exact same mistake of underestimating her, despite the fact that she has been training for this position, whether it is monster fighting or diplomacy, all of her life.
Thank you. Yeah, it's a difficult position. I think so many 12 and 13-year-olds relate. Martha, in The Seaside Corpse, Aggie doesn't seem to have trouble doing what she loves despite being 12, though there are some references to her connections. But we also see from other characters such as Nina and several women in the book that sexism is a big part of their lives. Mr. Augustus Fibley also comes to mind with the necessity of disguising oneself to succeed. So why was it important for you to highlight this throughout The Seaside Corpse?
Well, the place of women in the world has improved somewhat since 120 years ago when Aggie was 12, but we have a long way to go yet. And the walls that we bump up against were definitely a theme throughout the series. Aggie jokes in one of the earlier books about voting for something, and both her friend Hector and her grandmother lift their eyebrows because, of course, there was no such thing as a vote for women in 1903. The fight for women's rights had begun, but it would be at least 20 years before women are voting. And I just saw the series as an opportunity to shine a light on what has changed and what has not. And clever women still today need to be subversive and quietly rebel against the constraints. So that's what that's what it was there for.
Thank you. Yeah, it's one of those things, the more things change, the more they stay the same kind of phenomenons too. So thank you for that. Jonny, in Bear and Bird, Try Again. Bear's friends are supportive throughout his endeavors. Their encouragement is what motivates Bear to keep trying. Even when he underestimates himself, his friends believe in him. How does Bear and Bird, Try Again showcase healthy friendships, healthy relationships?
I think more so probably in this one than in the previous three, because in book 3, I introduced Bear and Bird to another group of friends, because Bear and Bird have always been constant in their friendship. And although they've been honest and they've been sort of caring between the two of them, I wanted to broaden that out into a wider sort of community peer group. And so I think in some respects, the initial sort of invitation, if you like, from the friends to enter into sort of a participation of going out on an adventure was a slightly different twist on Bear and Bird always initiating a conversation. But what was interesting, I think, with this one was that Bear's enthusiasm to want to participate, I think, threw up a lot of very interesting sort of conversations with the other groups, the children, if you like, involved. Their inclusion immediately then, if you like, gave Bear a reason for wanting to go off and try this. What he was also willing to do, I think, was willing to admit that he was uncertain. He had a sort of like a pause in thought of whether I can do this. And then he also admitted that probably he was mistaken for doing it, but his friends actually encouraged him to fulfill that and to succeed at a level that was good for him. And I think in some respects, in such a small amount of space, trying to bring all those elements together, I felt that the vehicle, if you like, the bicycle, was the one to do that.
Thank you. Yeah, it definitely comes across that way. And I think it's great for children to see that making mistakes and all of that, and the inclusive aspect of it. Thanks again. Andrea, in Ivelisse Explains It All, Ivelisse is really suffering. And while she has people in her life that care for her, it's often hard for her to see that. Also, different generations and in some ways her culture deal with emotions and with mental illness in different ways. So how do Ivelisse's relationships impact her view of herself and her interaction with the world?
Yeah, I mean, as children, we internalize what our loved ones say to us, right? And so even though Ivelisse loves her grandmother very much, and even though her grandmother loves her very much, the constant comments that she makes regarding Eva's need for therapy or meds, even though they're not malicious, they really get to Ivelisse, whether or not she realizes that straight away. And so for me, that was a big motivator in writing this book, because I think, especially when we talk about mental health in the context of Latinx families and breaking those generational cycles, we don't always exactly know how to support the people we love or how to ask for their support in return. And so in the book, Ivelisse does learn how to speak up for herself and for what she needs, even with people she loves. And so I hope that other kids will see that and be inspired to do the same.
Thank you. I was thinking about, there's a part in the book where she says that her grandmother gives her the affection that she needs, but then her words hurt her, but then her mother gives her the words of support, but isn't giving the affection that she needs. So I found that balance interesting as well. And then speaking of family relationships, Flora, many families are rife with secrets. I know that's definitely true for my family too. Many times these secrets are meant to protect family members, often children, but they do the opposite of what they intend, fracturing families as opposed to protecting them. And then we see that in A Spoonful of Time, we cannot escape our past. How are the past, present, and future inextricably, hard word, linked for Maya, and how do secrets and silence impact her relationships?
No, it's hard having an honest relationship when there are secrets, and even when the intentions are good, it could be harmful and damaging. Also, when you're keeping a secret from someone and you think you're doing it for their own good, you're basically making a decision for them that may or may not be the right one. And in Maya's case, her mother doesn't want to talk about her father because she doesn't want to have to deal with the pain of his absence. And if anything, that actually adds to Maya's pain and it isolates her because now she has no one to talk to about her father, to learn about him. And it's because of these secrets and these walls that are built up that really propel Maya to go forward and to make the decisions that she does and take the actions that she does. More than the average person, her past, present, and future are all linked together. And it's because she's not getting those answers in the present that she goes to the past to try to find them there.
Thank you. Yeah, she has that capability. Andrea, Ivelisse uses writing to express what she can't put into words. When the book begins, she says, if you can't trust a girl in her poems, well, who can you trust? But we soon find that she often hides things from herself and therefore us. So why did you choose this diary and also in verse format to share Ivelisse's story?
I chose the diary format because I wanted the reader to just be inside Ivelisse's head from the start and completely immersed in her perspective, even when she isn't being truthful to herself. And I chose verse because after many, many years of teaching English language learners and struggling readers in the public schools, I have found that verse is a lot more accessible for kids who want to read the same long and mature books that their peers are reading, but who don't have either the decoding skills or the stamina to read an entire middle grade novel in verse. I mean, in prose. They can read it in verse. That is my point.
Thank you. We got you. Yes, and that's definitely true. As a librarian for elementary and middle grade students, they are always excited when a book is in verse. Back to Martha, middle grade readers are also fascinated by murder. They love a good mystery. It's often difficult to find something age appropriate and still action packed. Aggie is based on a young Agatha Christie, who remains a favorite, always popular. The kids know who she is and are excited about it. So what drew you to creating the series? And for this particular book, bring in the paleontology and Mary Anning and Mary Anning's hometown, all of that. And what was your research process like? It's a big question. Wait, mute.
It's actually about 3 questions. I set myself the challenge of writing a mystery because I'd never done it before, but I had read hundreds, of course, and including many by Agatha Christie. So when I was thinking about who my kid's sleuth would be, I liked the idea of a girl with a morbid preoccupation, much like my own. But in her case, she grew up to, of course, devise roughly 300 murders and pull them off on the page. So my premise was, what if Agatha became a crime writer because she'd found several bodies in her youth? And that's where we start with Aggie Morton. As for the particular setting of this novel, Lyme Regis and cliffs and fossils. Agatha Christie's second husband was a renowned archaeologist. So it felt right to give Aggie some digging into history as part of her childhood as well, so that she would be just connected to the real woman's later life. And I couldn't go to England to do research for the Seaside Corpse because of the pandemic, as I normally would have done, but I read dozens of books and I found wonderful people online. A man who does fossil walks on the beach there in Lyme Regis gave me a tour on FaceTime. And a former curator of the Royal Ontario Museum talked me through the steps of building a jacket to protect a skeleton in transport. And I was introduced again online to a lovely old man in Dorset who had recovered an 11-foot ichthyosaur from the seabed. And he sent me a detailed description of that event. So everyone was very keen to help, and I got a lot done from very far away.
Technology is a wonderful thing in so many ways. So that's so great. Thank you so much. Flora, Food is such an integral part of A Spoonful of Time. Food and memory are linked to taste, and sometimes taste can transport us through time, though not quite as vividly as Maya and Harmony can. How does food connect people and share feelings in ways words cannot? And how do they lead to a more direct form of communication?
No, I always think that a food is carrying so much culture, tradition, emotions with it, sometimes more so than you can do with words. I mean, when you greet people, you welcome them with food. When you're helping someone mourn or who's injured, you help with food, and you celebrate with food too. So the way that Maya associates with food is very similar to how I had a relationship with food with my parents, especially my mother. She wouldn't say "I love you" or "sorry" if she knew she was in the wrong, but she would bring me like a plate of cut up fruit that she knew was my favorite, or she'd make my favorite meal. And I think that cooking also brings people together. So the act of cooking food, requires a synergy, a kind of a harmony between the people in order to produce something that's good and edible, but that it is something that people would enjoy eating. And so I wanted to convey that sense of food and cooking as well. Really bringing people together and conveying emotions and secrets that can't be that for various reasons the characters don't want to convey in words.
Thank you. And I appreciate the sharing of recipes in your book as well, so that others can try as well. It's a great addition. Kelly, A Royal Guide to Monster Slaying is a fantasy series with mythical creatures derived from folklore from a variety of cultures and places. What kind of research did you have to do to prepare for this book and the series in general?
I think I've been researching this book since I was Rowan's age. I grew up absolutely loving mythology, legend, monsters. So a lot of this is just baked in, where I've known this for so long. So for this book, it was more about going a little further into other cultures and lesser known types of monsters. But also for the series, I wanted to do that there was no magic. So all of these monsters, it's very heavily science based. So all the monsters had to be things that could have evolved, things that would make sense. So it was going through all my monsters and saying, okay, does this make sense from a science perspective? And I could find some really fun stuff online. Like I have a Pegasi, winged horse. And there are people who have done like papers on how a horse could actually fly, like how it would have to be lighter in all of these ways, how big the wings would have to be. People out there have as much fun with monsters as I do.
That's good to know. It's interesting. It's amazing what you can find, like the information that you can find. Jonny, learning to ride a bike is such a timeless activity that most children will experience. Bear and Bird Try Again focuses on perseverance, the idea that failure is not a permanent state, which is often really difficult for young children. So what inspired you to use bike riding to showcase this importance of not giving up?
Probably on 3 levels, really. One was probably teaching my daughter how to learn to ride a bike when she was young. It's a sort of like a first experience, a big thing. But I also think it's an individual pursuit that could be broadened out into a community pursuit. So in a way, riding a bike gets you places and you might be able to join up with other people. So I think there's a sort of a community that could be built around that. But I also saw it pretty much as a metaphor of going forward, because actually if you want to ride a bike, you've got to go forward. You can't, unless you ride a specific bike like a circus bike, you can't go backwards. So it is a physical thing of going forward. It's a natural thing. But in order to do that, you have to bring in all sorts of other things. You have to challenge your abilities. You have to pedal, you have to balance, you have to steer. And I think that's a great way of being able to guide somebody, is to actually ride a bike. So in some respects, I think it's a eventually through that sort of perseverance, you can achieve a level of success for your own ability. It's, you know, you can ride particularly fast, or you could ride for leisure, or you could whatever. And I think bike is a wonderful sort of vehicle for that, not to use a pun.
Thank you. Yeah, it was especially great for me. My oldest son is getting an age where a lot of his friends already ride a bike, but he really struggles with the part that I put in: failure is not a permanent state.
Yeah.
So we're working on it, but thank you.
Well, I think that's the key. I think it's actually accepting that you're not going to be great at it to begin with, but with a bit of encouragement, so long as you keep going forwards, you can actually do it. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, it's a conversation that we keep having. So thanks again. So this is a two-person question. Both A Spoonful of Time and Ivelisse Explains It All deals with intergenerational and cultural responses to trauma. Why was it important for you to showcase these experiences? We can start with Andrea and then Flora.
Yeah, so I think even though we don't see it in books quite as often, a lot of homes are intergenerational. I know as a teacher, I saw many students who lived with cousins and their aunts, or with grandparents, or even great-grandparents, especially kids who are coming from other countries. And so I think it's important to acknowledge that even though new generations may be doing things differently now, like especially, you know, in terms of mental health, if you're living in a household with people who don't share those beliefs or aren't quite on the same page, it can be very hard to get the support that you want or need. Because, I mean, as kids, you're dependent, you know, you can't drive yourself to therapy, an adult has to drive you there. You can't get a medical prescription without an adult okaying it, you know? And so a lot of kids are dependent on those adults who may be from different generations and may or may not approve of the services that they want.
Yeah, I think, you know, that definitely rings true to me as well. And, you know, I wanted to show the impact of intergenerational and trauma, because, you know, we're not born in vacuums. You know, we're creatures of our situations. We're raised by people who weren't born in vacuums, and that impacts who we are, whether or not we realize it or want that to happen. And I wanted to show that, you know, having grown up in a multi-generational household, I wanted to show that there are ripple effects, and you have to think about that when you're figuring out how to deal with the trauma, and how it could be impacting the ones that you love as well. I think that's important to know, so that you know, people don't feel isolated dealing with trauma as well within a family.
You know, I think, as you said, Andrea, it is so relatable to so many students, and you're right, it's not in a lot of books, but so many, I said students because, you know, kids, because yeah, several kids do live like this. As a child, my grandmother lived with me. So I think it is a common phenomenon, and it's true, Flora, as you said, right? We carry within us, our experiences of our parents and grandparents. So I think it is such a wonderful thing for those that experience it to see, and those that do not experience it to really see and understand. So this is another multi-person question. The Final Trial and The Seaside Corpse are final books in their series. They both managed to work as standalones in some ways. So how is writing a fourth book different from writing a first book? And did you know in the beginning what was going to happen to these characters, or did it develop as you wrote? Oh, let's start with Martha.
I definitely didn't know at the beginning what was going to happen to the characters. When I began the series, I had a 2-book contract, so I knew there would be more than one. And part of the idea was to introduce kids to the tropes of mysteries, many of which Agatha Christie invented or certainly made popular. In the first book, The Body Under the Piano, it's set in a quiet town simmering with inter-neighbor feuds and things, which is pretty standard Christie setting. The three main characters are Aggie Morton, her Belgian friend, Hector Perot, and her sharp-eyed grandmother. The second book takes place at a country house during a blizzard where Aggie and Hector find a corpse on Christmas morning. And as I approached the end of that book, the second one, I asked the publisher, should I be writing a finale or should I just be preparing for ongoing? So that was how I managed to get the next contract for the third and fourth book. And each book has a huge cast of new characters. But I like to say, after writing the series for 6 years, that I've had a few sleepovers with that little core group of Aggie, Hector, and Granny Jane. They just keep coming. But the series did become a quartet. So it's the autumn, winter, spring, and summer of Aggie's 12th year. And during that time, I learned to write mysteries. Aggie and Hector became better sleuths. And the fourth book is the final one. So I needed to pull down the shutters on the whole invented world as well as the single story so that it could stand alone, but also complete the series in a satisfying way.
Yep, and for the final trial, I knew from the beginning that it was going to be 4 books long, and that in the fourth book she'd have to face her final trial, because in book 1 she becomes far too young, the royal monster slayer elect, and so she has to then train, and then go through her trials and her final trial. The problem was that in book, I think 1, it mentions that the final trial is them is the royal monster hunter is left on the mountain alone for a certain amount of time. And that did not work. It didn't work because it was boring, but also it didn't work thematically because the entire series is about her learning to work as part of a group, learning to, rely on her new friends, and she's not just the royal monster hunter, she also has her group that she has to rely on. So having her suddenly in book 4 alone on a mountain facing monsters would have been boring. So I had to completely redo it and basically say, well, she has fought so many monsters that there's no point in her being alone on the mountain, and instead she has to solve a diplomatic problem involving dragons.
It works. So thank you for that. Jonny, Bear and Bird Try Again is also part of a series, but it's a picture book series, a little different. They don't necessarily have to be read in order. What is that process like for you?
I think it gives you freedom. I think it gives you freedom to sort of explore wherever you go. And I think in terms of Bear and Bird, because it's aimed at a particular audience, it's aimed for, albeit I see it as a crossover conversation between child and adult, carer, whoever. I think I try and inhabit the mind of a child, which is slightly frenetic. So it's literally, what subject now? It's not, I have a plan for which subjects come after one another. It's much more to do with, today I'm going to experience sharing. Tomorrow I might, be my first day at school. It might be my birthday. It's all of those things that happen in a way that's in the mind of a child, as opposed to an order of events that might lead you from book 1 to book 4. So ultimately, I see the process of picture books being allowed to go backwards and forwards, freely. And I think with Bear and Bird, they're a vehicle by which you can do that. They don't grow up, they actually maintain a level, but within that, there's lots of different things. They don't actually really explore too far from their cave either. So there's a sort of like a comfort within that they can experience so much. So yeah, I mean, for me, it just offers me the flexibility to go anywhere.
Thank you. Do you plan on writing more for this series?
Well, yeah, I mean, that's the thing. The publisher's on my heels at the moment. So I've got two more. I've got two more actually in the process, and then literally I've got another 2, possibly 3 to follow on from this board book series. So I just need to think of a few ideas.
Good luck.
Okay, thank you.
So that's all we have time for today. It was so lovely to speak with all of you and to learn more about your process and your writing. I want to thank you to all of our speakers and to all the librarians and educators for joining us today. I want to remind everyone that the entire environment, the booths, the webcast, all of it is available on demand for 3 months. So thank you again and have a wonderful day.